Hello there, FFTCG community. I'm Judge Jared, and this is the 9th episode of Rules Roundup. We are hanging on to single digits for our lives right now, about to be on the cusp of hitting 10 there. But I'm glad that you're here to join me. We're going into the release weekend for the Final Fantasy Magic the Gathering set, so if you're excited for that, then I'm happy for you. If you're not partaking at all in the Magic the Gathering set, then I'm excited for your wallet and your bank account. So good for you in either scenario. Before we hop into the questions today, I will say that I want to share kind of a cool story. My LGS did a thing for our FFTCG group. There was enough interest among our players in our normal play group here that they actually arranged and scheduled a specific pre-release for the Magic the Gathering set on our regular locals night at our regular time. That was just for us. It was just for our play group, the ones who were there week in and week out playing FFTCG. And so it was a lot of fun. We got to basically just do a locals night, but playing Magic instead. I personally have not opened a Magic the Gathering pack since probably about 1998. So that was an experience. And I'm not particularly chasing the set, but it was a fun experience to do that just with the local community here and all that. And it's a good one and done for me because I enjoyed the experience, but I got my fill. That being said, my last prize pack that I got for the night, I did get an Aerith out of it, which was super exciting for me because Aerith is my favorite character in all of Final Fantasy. So, yeah, so it's a fun little experience, but I'm just happy that my LGS was like catering to us and taking care of the community that's been there for a long time and everything. So anyway, that was my little story for the week. Let's get into some questions because I know that we all want to get some questions here, right? That's what you're here for. So let's go ahead and do that. First question this week is Opus 24 Basch. If I flip a category 12 card, do I have to add to hand? All right, this Basch, he's got this auto ability that happens at the beginning of the attack phase on your turn. You select one of the two actions, and the action that they're asking about here is the second one. It reads, reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, add one category 12 card among them to your hand, and put the rest of the cards into the break zone. So they're asking here, hey, I flip over these 3 cards, one of them is a category 12 card, am I forced to take it into my hand? Now, reading through that one more time, if we just kind of parse the words carefully, it says, reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, add one category 12 card among them to your hand, and put the rest in the break zone. Now, there's nothing in there that says you may add one category 12 card among them to your hand, or add up to one category 12 card among them to your hand. So because we don't have those kind of outs, those little provisions in there, yes, if there's a category 12 card, you are going to have to add it to your hand. Also because this is being revealed, so both players see it, right? If it was a case where you were just looking at the top 3 and then adding one, then because it's not revealed to your opponent, it's not public information, I guess you couldn't even get away with it then, to be honest, because it goes to the break zone, so they would see it there. But yeah, you have to put them into your hand if you have one in there. And you might be wondering, why does this person really want to give up the 12 card? Why would they not want the extra card in the hand? Because this card sees play alongside Fujin and Raijin, kind of in the Outcast Reborn version of Turbo Chaos that used to exist. If you have Fujin or Raijin out, you might value more having that card in the break zone, right? You might be trying to get specifically to 10, and you're like, I wanted to put 3 cards in the break zone, but I hit a 12 card, so now I've only got 2 cards in the break zone. I'm only at 9. That kind of hosed me, right? So it can come up, right? It's a little bit niche, I guess, but yeah. The answer to the question is you do have to take it. So sorry, another card for you. Another probably 2 CP for you. Next question here is Black Knight. Can I choose whether to put it into the break zone upon an opponent's forward of cost 4 or less entering the field? There's a follow-up question that says, if Black Knight does not choose, can they get around restrictions of cannot be chosen by abilities? All right, let's tackle these one at a time. The text on Black Knight, it's a monster, and it says, when a forward of your opponent of cost 4 or less enters the field, put Black Knight into the break zone. If you do so, break it. So the first part of this question is, when an opponent plays a forward of cost 4 or less, can I choose to put it in the break zone? Do I get to decide whether to do it or not? This is a little bit like the Basch question, right? We're getting into something's triggered. Am I being forced to do it, or do I have kind of an escape hatch for this effect? And for the same, in the same way that we covered Basch, we're going to talk about Black Knight here. The effect, right? We have the trigger event, which is when the forward enters the field, and then the effect itself just says put Black Knight into the break zone. It's pretty straightforward, unfortunately, if you were trying to like save this to break something that you really want to break, because it doesn't say you may put it into the break zone, then you are forced to carry out the effect, right? It's an auto ability. When it triggers, it does its thing whether you want to or not, right? I've seen a player have to trigger their Lenna and draw on an empty deck and lose because of it, right? So auto abilities, they're out of our control. And sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing, but yeah, out of our control. So because this one doesn't give you like a you may option, it will get put into the break zone, whether you want it to or not. It also means that if you had multiple of these out, one forward entering will trigger all of them, and they will all gang up. The multiple Black Knights will gang up on the single forward. Now, the second half of this, they said, because Black Knight does not choose, can they get around the restrictions of cannot be chosen by abilities? So we're talking about cards that have either an ongoing effect on them or a field ability that says they cannot be chosen by abilities. And the thing to keep in mind here is just a general rule that I would love for you all to just like lock in, sear into your brains, which is if a card does not say choose, it is not choosing. One more time there. If a card does not say choose, it is not choosing. So if we look at the effect here, after the putting the Black Knight in the break zone, it says if you do so, break it. Pretty simple by effect standards, actually. Not a lot of words. Nowhere in there does use the word choose. Even going all the way back to the trigger event, we don't have the word choose in here at all. So Black Knight is not choosing, which means even though it does reference a forward, right, it's targeting a forward in a way, right, because it's triggered by it, and then it references it by way of the way the effect just kind of resolves and is worded, but it doesn't use the word choose. So it gets through, it works its way around anything that cannot be chosen because it's not choosing. So that's the plus side of it, right? The negative before was that you don't get to control whether it goes in the break zone. But the positive side is that if it's something you wouldn't have been able to choose before, then it doesn't choose it. It also means if they had like the wind Cecil, that it would hit a forward without triggering Cecil and forcing you to have to pay 2. So that's neat. Next up, we have a question about Zidane and Chaos. It says, hi, my opponent only controls Zidane, who cannot be targeted by my abilities. Well, that sounds familiar right now. I play a Chaos, making my opponent choose a card to give me control of. Does Zidane negate Chaos? Now, this Zidane, you probably either haven't seen it in a while or you've never seen it. All we have to worry about is that first line of text, which just says Zidane cannot be chosen by your opponent's abilities. That will be relevant in the last question about Black Knight. It's even a 4 CP or less forward. Anyway, can't be chosen by abilities. So Chaos here, for you Jack Garland fans, or if you are Jack Garland, I guess, looking for Chaos, trying to kill Chaos. His text, his auto ability, says, when Chaos enters the field, your opponent selects one forward other than light or dark they control, and you gain control of it. So the question here is, they only control Zidane, no other forwards. If I play Chaos, what happens is essentially the question here. I do need to point out in their question, the way they worded it, they said, is it making my opponent choose a card to give me control of? In the same way that on the last question, I pointed out if it doesn't say choose, it's not choosing. Well, that's what happens here with Chaos. The effect, again, just says your opponent selects one forward other than light or dark they control. The word choose is not in there. So, yeah, it's just kind of worded incorrectly in the question, which might be causing some of the confusion here, is the fact that it doesn't use the word choose. So because it's not choosing, just like the last question, it can get Zidane, right? Because your opponent has to select a forward, not choose a forward, has to select a forward, and that's their only forward. So assuming nothing else happens, no other effects here, then yeah, when Chaos resolves, they're going to have to give you that Zidane, and now the Zidane can't be chosen by their abilities, which is rather annoying. So yeah, Zidane doesn't negate Chaos. Chaos, part of why it's so dang good is because it selects and it gets around those sorts of protections. Next question. When Earth Cecil breaks himself to search, can this be Amaterasu'd? I put Amaterasu in there, even though I'm sure everybody by now probably knows. If you've been playing more than, 30 seconds, you probably have experienced being Amaterasu'd. But it chooses an auto ability and cancels it, and then the damage part's not important for this question. But yeah, cancels auto ability. So the question is, when Earth Cecil breaks himself with his action ability, can it be Amaterasu'd? I kind of gave away the answer by the way I phrased that, because I described it as an action ability. How do we know it's an action ability? Well, if you look at it, it says, put Cecil into the break zone, search for one card named Cecil with Job Paladin and play it onto the field. If we have a colon somewhere in the ability text, the effect text there, it is not an auto ability. Auto abilities never use colons. The only ones that do are action abilities and special abilities. So by definition, this is not an auto ability, which means that Amaterasu can't choose it. There's not a valid target there because it's not an auto ability. So I know that this card has kind of hit a renaissance right now. We're seeing this Cecil a lot in Unidex, or I guess Category 4 Unidex, and Warrior of Light has started using it. So people are trying to figure out, how do I get around this? Because it's annoying that whenever I try to target the Cecil, he just goes bloop, turns into another Cecil. It's even more annoying. But yeah, there's no auto ability there. I mean, it goes on the stack, but it's still on the stack as an action ability. So unfortunately, Amaterasu, not the answer that you're looking for. You're going to need something else. You're going to need Opus 5 Porum or something to cancel an action ability. That'd be fun. All right, next up here. I am always happy to answer questions about Final Fantasy 6 cards. Even though I just said earlier that Aerith is my favorite character in Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy 6, all-time best game, in my opinion. So let's talk about Terra. It says, if I steal Terra through a Zidane 16-like ability and then kill her myself, this is a dark question, do I A, get to retrieve 2 summons from my break zone, and B, will the next one be reduced by 4? All right, there's layers to this. Let's try to unwrap the layers. I didn't put the Zidane on here. This is not stealing like the way that Chaos just stole a 4 before, right? This is the Zidane that it's an effect where it removes a card from the game and then allows you, removes a card from the game of the opponents and then allows you to cast it as if it was your own, right? So you're stealing it in terms of like, ooh, now I have control over casting this and it's no longer a part of your deck and everything, right? So the person asking is like, all right, I hit this Terra with Zidane. I did a little happy dance. Now I want to cast it. What can I get out of this? So the first bit, they're saying they're going to kill her, right? So let's talk about her ability at this point. Her auto ability says, when she enters the field or is put from the field into the break zone, choose one summon in your break zone, add it to your hand. And then there's more to this ability. It says, during this turn, the cost required to cast your next summon is reduced by 2, and it cannot become 0. So, when we first decide to cast this stolen Terra, we cast her, she enters the field, auto ability triggers. At that point, we choose a summon in our break zone, add it to our hand, and then the rest of the effect says, during this turn, the cost required to cast your next summon is reduced by 2. So that is now this ongoing effect that's just floating, right? Just floating out there, waiting for your next summon to be cast, and as long as it's during this turn. So as long as you don't cast a summon, it's just going to keep chilling. It's just going to be like, okay, I'm waiting here for you to cast something. But then they say they kill their own Terra. Not the words I would have used. So sad. I don't know. For some reason, kill is so much darker than break. So her auto ability also has that trigger that says when she's put from the field in the break zone, you do the same thing, right? We still have that effect that's floating out there, the ongoing effect to reduce the next thing by 2. So part of the question here is probably, oh, okay, well, she's going to the opponent's break zone because it's their card. Do I get the effect from this? That's a common question that we see with stolen forwards, right? Or stolen characters, I guess. But I think we typically only see forwards get stolen. I guess it could be a backup if it was the Zidane effect, right? Yeah, it could be backup or a monster. Anyway, so what happens here? The thing about zone movement triggers is that it, again, it's counterintuitive. I've said it before, is they trigger not when the card actually goes to the zone that it says. They trigger at the moment before they move there. When it's been like locked in, determined where they're going, as long as they're going to be going to the correct zone for that movement trigger, then it's going to trigger. And at that point in time, because you control that character, you still control it, you're the one who it's going to trigger for, right? So luckily, when this Terra breaks, it's not going to then give your opponent the auto ability, and then you just grumble about it, right? So you're going to get the auto ability again. So she goes to the break zone, which is going to be back to your opponent's break zone where she belongs. And then triggers, you got to summon from your break zone again. And then now we have that second part of the ability, right? During this turn, the cost required to cast your next summon is reduced by 2. So we have 2 of these now floating around. Just ongoing effects floating around and saying, hey, the next summon you cast is reduced by 2. We're assuming, of course, we didn't cast a summon somewhere between the first and the second of these auto abilities resolving. So her question was, A, do they get to retrieve 2 summons? Yes, you do, because both times it was a character you controlled. You got the auto ability both times. The second one was, will the next one be reduced by 4? Does it stack? It does stack, right? As long as you didn't do something, you didn't cast something to make that first one, come in, that happen there, that kind of replacement effect on the cast there, as on the cost of it, then yeah, they will stack. So if somewhere in there you got a 5 CP summon, like Battle of 4, that's been a thing recently, then yeah, then when you cast that Battle of 4, you're going to be able to cast it for 1. So that's cool. Yeah, it stacks. So you can do that. Or I don't know, if you got an arc and you don't have a dark forward, then you can cast it for 5, I guess, right? We're just going to weird situations today. So yeah, it stacks. You get it both times. Fun stuff. Stealing Terra, actually pretty fun. I don't recommend killing her, but if she breaks, enjoy what you get out of it. Next question here. I've had a judge tell me that if you win by inflicting damage on an empty deck, that you record the number of cards flipped over into damage, not the actual number of damage taken. Is that not the case? This is getting into tournament stuff again here, right? It's not about any particular rule about cards or interactions and stuff. This is getting into how things are recorded for tournaments, right? Whether it's locals or otherwise. Because if you're using the official software and the official way that you should be doing things, then part of that is recording how much damage was received by each player. Full credit to the person that asked this question, because of the way that they said it here. They said recording the number of cards flipped over into damage, not the actual number of damage taken. So they understand that there's a distinction here, but I'm going to explain that to you because most people do not know that there's a distinction here. So because when we take damage, we generally go, all right, cool, I flipped it over, I took the damage, right? We think of it a lot of times as that the flipping over and putting it in the damage zone, that is the receiving of damage, right? We think of it as like, once I've flipped it over there, now I've taken the damage. It's not how it works in the rules. So the rules actually distinguish between these two things. And the flipping the card over into the damage zone is actually basically a function of having taken the damage already. It's like I wouldn't say it's a response, but it says like, it's almost like an auto ability. I don't want to actually call it that because we're not using the stack. It's not really that, but like the way that it's phrased in the rules, it says when you take a damage, you flip over a card to the damage zone, right? So the way the rules are laying this out, the taking the damage is independent of the card flipping, right? You take damage whether or not you have cards to flip into there, right? So this is it's relevant in a couple ways, but I'll stick to what's right in front of us. So they're saying, okay, let's say that they were at 5 damage, right? They had no cards in deck. You attacked, you dealt the damage. They don't have any cards left, right? So they lose because of Deckout, right? The question is, when you're reporting this, did they take 5 damage or did they take 6 damage? Because they had 5 damage, 5 cards flipped over in their damage zone. They just took a damage, but they didn't, so A lot of people think, oh, I didn't have a 6th card to put in there, so I didn't take that 6 damage. I lost to Deckout, but I didn't actually take the damage. Not the case. And again, the person who asked the question understands the distinction here. It's just more about how you're supposed to report it. But for all of your knowledge, yeah, it's the damage taken is the damage taken. And then whether or not you have the cards for it is completely separate from that. This can get really silly if you have something like the Shikari auto ability that deals 3 damage, or even the Fail Thanos fire one that deals you 3 damage based off of an X burst happening. So if you take multiple damage, let's say you were at 3 damage, had no cards in deck, and you get popped for 3 all in one effect, right? You would be considered to have taken 6 damage because you did take 6 damage. Just because you didn't have the cards for it doesn't mean you didn't take the damage, right? We're not relying on those cards to actually mean that you took the damage there. So you would still lose the deck out, but you would write it down as having received 6 damage. So, important thing for you all to know, whether you're playing in local qualifier or Materia Cup, or even at locals, if they are using the official software and reporting damage. If somebody mills out and they milled out due to damage, right? It was the damage that they didn't have anything in their deck. You have to mark down the actual damage dealt, not the number of cards in the damage zone. Actual damage dealt. Okay. All right, another question here without a card, because it's just kind of I wouldn't say generic. I guess it's just a broad question. If I give a forward that entered the field this turn haste until the end of the turn, that forward is unable to use an ability with the dull icon on the following opponent's turn because it doesn't have haste anymore, right? So they're saying they played a character on their turn. This is a forward. They played a forward on their turn. Doesn't naturally have haste. They gave it haste with something that only lasted till the end of the turn. Let's say Opus 2 Belias. Cast Belias on it. All right, it's got haste till the end of the turn. And part of what it has is a dull icon ability. They're saying, okay, well now it's passed to the opponent's turn. On the opponent's turn, can I use that dull icon ability or can I not? Because it doesn't have haste anymore, right? The haste only lasts until the end of my turn. And I can understand the confusion on this, right? Because you're thinking, okay, well, I gave it haste, so that kind of just eliminated its restrictions, right? It just kind of bypassed the whole, needing to wait a full turn type thing. But it doesn't work that way, in the sense that this is another one of these broad rules, kind of like what I said about the thing where if it doesn't say choose, it's not choosing. Something you want to keep in mind, just as a broad across the whole game rule, is that in order to use an ability that has the dull icon, specifically the dull icon, one of two things needs to be true. It either needs to currently have haste, or you need to have controlled it since the beginning of your most recent turn. Actually, I should specify this is only for forwards and backups, not for monsters. Okay, so monsters get to just live their best life. For forwards and backups, if it doesn't currently have haste and you have not controlled it continuously since the beginning of your most recent turn, cannot use a dull icon ability. Okay? So continuously means like it didn't like leave the field and come back or anything like that. It means it didn't like get stolen by an opponent's effect and then given back to you. And I say your most recent turn because depending on the situation, it might be talking about your turn or your opponent's turn. So if it's your opponent's turn, we're going to reference whenever your turn was before this, as far as whether it has that eligibility, right? But also it needs to have been controlled continuously since that point, right? So if you did control it continuously throughout your whole last turn, and then during their turn, at some point you lost control of it, and then it goes back, well, no, we have that. It's been broken, right? You have to go from the current point in time all the way back to the beginning of your most recent turn, and then there's got to be an unbroken line there. So, yeah. Even if you gave it haste back then, it doesn't have haste now. It doesn't meet one of those two criteria. Can't use a dull icon ability. All right, next question here is, it says, with Frimelda, I don't know what the word select means. As in, is select different from choose like it is in other places in the game? Also, it doesn't say may. So I'm worried that if there are no enemy forwards on the field and you don't have a forward in your hand, you'd have to start choosing your own forwards or even have Frimelda kill herself. Man, we got a lot of people mentioning killing forwards today. Frimelda, for those who are not familiar, she's got this auto ability. During the attack phase on your turn, you select one of two following actions. It doesn't say up to, by the way. It says select one of the two following actions. First action is choose one forward. Until the end of the turn, it loses 2,000 power for each different element among characters you control. Second effect says play one forward of cost 4 or less from your hand onto the field. So this person is worried. They are worried about this. And I get that, because if you've ever played a card that had an effect that was not, or that was mandatory, right? Didn't have a way out of it, and you were forced to select your own thing or choose your own thing and kill it or do something bad to it, like that's like scarring, right? That will just stick with you. And so I get the fear of like, I do not want to be screwed by my own cards. And we talked actually earlier in this video about how auto abilities, you don't have control over them unless they give you kind of an escape hatch, right? This one, the selecting part doesn't give you an escape hatch, right? Here it says select one of the two following actions. So it doesn't give you a select up to, right? If you had like up to, then you could be like, 0, I'm selecting 0. And then because the first effect says choose one forward, it doesn't even say choose one forward your opponent controls, right? So you can't even, if you select that one, you can't even be like, oh, okay, well, they don't have a forward, so I can just do that, and whew, all right, we're all good. So they're worried about this, because they're like, what if I don't have a forward to play? If I don't have a forward to play, do I have to select the first one? And then if they don't have any forwards, then I just have to start, like, Frimelda just starts turning on her own people. She turns into Cain and just starts just stabbing people, and like, I guess she's in the Tactics Advanced universe, so she's Delita instead, right? If we're gonna go with kind of evil-y stuff here. So here's the good news. The good news is that even though it doesn't say may, you are allowed to select the second option. And you might think, wait, why am I allowed to select the second option? I don't have a forward to play. The thing is that when an auto ability triggers, if there's multiple actions to choose from, then you can select an action even if you can't carry out what it would do, right? You're not actually required to. This is different than casting a summon, by the way. If a summon has multiple actions to it that you're selecting, then whatever actions you're selecting, if they require targets or something like that, or a certain type of payment or something to do it, like you are required to have those when you cast it. Otherwise you have to rewind and then reselect different options, so you're not doing ones that you can't carry out there. But with an auto ability, you can always select the thing that you can't carry out. All right, so that means that you can select play one forward of cost 4 or less from your hand out on the field, and then not play one, right? And you might think, I'll give you kind of a couple weird options on this. One is, what if I just don't want to play the forward, right? I have the option, but I don't want to play it, right? Now the hand is a hidden zone. Because it's a hidden zone, it means that you're never forced to do something like that's hidden there. So even if you have a forward that you can play, you can just, when it goes resolve, you're like, no, not playing one. And it's a hidden zone, so you're not forced to. Separate from that is that, let's say that your opponent knew you had one in your hand, right? Let's say that they'd revealed your hand in some way right before this. They know every single card that's in your hand. And they even know, like, yeah, you have a forward that you can play with this. You're like, am I forced to? Because they know. No, you're still not forced to. Even though they know what's in your hand. It's a hidden zone. You're still not required to. So, yeah, the rules say that you don't have to play it there. And then the other fun thing, just to kind of point it out, let's say you have 0 cards in your hand. You have no hand. You can still select the second option, right? You can select that even though you have no cards in your hand, right? Part of this also is that, things could change between when it triggers and when it resolves, right? You might have 0 cards in your hand and it triggers, but then something else triggered and it drew you a card before Frimelda resolved, and then oh look, I drew a forward. Cool. All right, I'm gonna play it off Frimelda. Right. But yeah, so the good news here, you do not have to start making Frimelda, turn heel on everybody. Yeah, it's all safe there, even without the May. Next question is Lenna. If I play Lenna, I choose which trigger goes on the stack first, right? Then if I pay for whichever I put on top, that auto ability to choose a forward in break zone goes on top of the stack now, so that forward is played onto the field before I even get to paying for the second auto? Question mark. This is a Lenna that saw a lot of play up until the backup Lenna just stole her spotlight, because that backup Lenna is way too good. So trying to find a space, especially in the same element, right? If you're playing water and you're not playing Lenna, you have to have like a really good reason. So it hasn't seen much play, but when it was seeing play, this was a common thing that was coming up, was like, all right, how does the timing on all this work out, right? She's got 2 different auto abilities. They involve paying crystals. How do I stack this and make it resolve in the way that I want to? So this question is about that. They're asking about stacking it in a certain way, paying for one. When does the payment of these crystals happen? Like, what's going to happen when that thing enters versus the other auto ability resolving? I'm going to try to untangle this as best I can here. So I should read what her abilities do. So they're almost identical. First one says, when Lenna enters the field, you may pay a crystal. When you do so, choose one forward of cost 2 or less in your break zone, played onto the field. Okay. Second auto ability. When Lenna enters the field, you may pay 2 crystals. When you do so, choose one forward of cost 3 or less other than card name Lenna in your break zone, played onto the field. So there are 2 identical abilities, with the exception that one of them is you're paying 1 crystal, the other one's paying 2 crystals. The first one is a forward of cost 2 or less. The other one is a forward of cost 3 or less. That's not Lenna. And that's it. It's basically 2 of the same thing, but like different tiers of it. So the way this is going to work is that they both trigger, and then when you have priority, because they're both your autos that triggered, you can stack them whichever order you want. If you want to put the 1 crystal on the bottom and 2 crystals on top, you can do that. If you want to put 2 crystals on the bottom and 1 crystal on top, you can do that. As far as when the payment happens, because that was part of this question, it says, then if I pay for whichever I put on top, actually they didn't even ask about the paying, but it says before I even get to paying for the second auto. So the thing I wanted to bring up here is that the payment of these crystals doesn't happen until that auto ability is actually resolving, right? Something to keep in mind, because this trips people up with auto abilities a lot, is trying to figure out what parts of the auto ability happen when it triggers and is put on the stack, and what parts of the auto ability happen when it's resolving. And sometimes people get wrapped up in thinking that it does more than it actually does before you get to resolving it. So kind of as a quick little explainer here, with auto abilities, they're actually not just auto abilities, to be honest, it's any effect that goes on the stack. There are only 4 things that happen when an effect is being placed on the stack. Doesn't matter if it's an action ability, auto ability, summon, whatever. If it's being put on the stack, 4 things happen. The first one is let's go with the first one is selecting actions, right? If there's multiple actions, you will select them when it's being put on the stack. Second one, choosing targets. If it uses the word choose specifically, then when you're putting on the stack, you must choose your targets. Third one is assigning values to things. This is not morals, not those type of values, but like, let's say you're putting Yuffie's ability on the stack, or special ability that deals 24,000 damage, and it's split amongst several forwards, right? You have to assign how much of that damage is being dealt to each of those forwards when it's being put on the stack, right? You have to assign that damage when it's being put on the stack. That's the third type of thing that happens when you're putting an effect on the stack. Fourth one is assigning different effects to different targets. What I mean by that is, I think there was a Lastwell that saw play for a hot minute forever ago that has an ability that you choose 2 forwards. One of them you dull freeze, the other one you deal like 8,000 damage to, or something like that, right? So you choose 2 forwards, but one of them's getting dull frozen, the other one's getting the damage. You have to assign at that point. You're choosing your two targets. You have to assign which one of them's the dull frozen and which one of them's the 8,000, right? There's anything like that, right? If you're targeting multiple things and they're being treated different ways, you have to assign which way they're being treated there. Like which effect, part of the effect is lining up with which target, right? So those four things: selecting actions, choosing targets, assigning values, assigning effects, right? Those are the only four things that happen when an effect goes on the stack. Anything else, you gotta wait till it resolves. Okay, now back to Lenna. So when the first one of these resolves, you pay whatever amount of crystals there is. You do the effect, right? You pick your forward, plays it onto the field. If playing it onto the field then caused any other autos to trigger or anything, then those trigger and they're going to be put on the stack. And even if it didn't cause anything to trigger, you still have to wait for both players to pass on an empty stack before the second Lenna auto ability is going to resolve anyway. So a very popular thing that happened when this Lenna was being played before was, let's say that you played this Lenna and you had exactly 2 crystals at that point in time. What they would typically do is they would play the Lenna, they would stack it so that the 2 crystals on the bottom of the stack, the 1 crystal was on the top of the stack. They'd use the 1 crystal ability, they'd pay it, they'd pick Gao in their break zone, the Gao that when it enters the field you gain a crystal, right? So they pick that one, the effect plays Gao to the field, Gao enters the field and goes, hey, gain a crystal, right? You gain a crystal, now you're back to 2 crystals again. So then you resolve Lenna's second ability, and guess what? We got 2 crystals now again. And then you pay that and then choose some other 3-cost thing to play onto the field, right? So you can stack it in that way, especially to get the crystal back to be able to afford the second one. You don't have to pay the crystals up front because it wasn't part of those 4 things that I mentioned. Okay. So to specifically get into their thing here, it says, I choose which trigger goes on the stack first, right? Yes, you do. This says, then if I pay for whichever put on top, that auto ability to choose a forward goes on top of the stack now, so that forward is played onto the field before I even get painted for the second one. Yes, I didn't actually point this part out of it yet, but it does say when you do so, choose 1 forward, right? So I guess for clarity's sake, you would pay that first crystal, right? Whichever one is on the stack first, I guess. How many crystals you pay for that, and then after you pay for it, now you've generated a new auto ability. That auto ability goes on the stack and chooses the forward, and then you still have to pass priority again. And then when it resolves, you play it on the field, right? So there's an extra step there, right? That it's paying and then creating a new auto ability. So I guess it's a little more complicated than I pointed out before with the Gao thing, but just kind of insert that extra step into each one, that after you paid for each one of them, you have a new auto going on the stack. So it gets pretty complicated, which makes sense that this question would come up. But yeah, it works the way that the person asked about it and wants it to work. So we're all good there. Believe that leads us to our last question now. Yep, this is our last question for today. Dark Zenos enters from the break zone, dies to Odin. Man, poor Zenos. Does he still RFG? I'm not sure if he gets lost from what it looks to be a delayed auto. What's fun about this is I answered a somewhat complicated question, I think, about this Zenos a few episodes ago, but it was actually about the second half, the second auto ability here. And then now we're having a question about the first auto ability. So we got complete coverage on Zenos' abilities. To explain what the question's about, he's got a field ability first that says you can cast Zenos from your break zone. End of ability, right? So you can cast him from your break zone if he's in there. Cool. But then he has an auto ability that says when Zenos enters the field from the break zone, at the end of the turn, remove Zenos from the game. So the non-complicated version of this is that during your turn, Zenos is in the break zone. You go, hey, you know what? I'm going to pay 4 and I'm going to cast Zenos from the break zone. Whoop. All right, Zenos is now on the field. But when he enters, it says when Zenos enters the field from the break zone, which is what just happened, trigger event, he just entered from the break zone. At the end of the turn, remove Zenos from the game. So he enters the field, this auto ability triggers. When it resolves, it creates a delayed auto ability. The trigger for that delayed auto ability is at the end of the turn, and the effect is remove Zenos from the game. So you cast Zenos, enters the field, auto ability triggers. He he resolves, and then you do whatever you're going to do with Zenos, because he's also got his other auto ability there. It's not important to this. And then at the end of the turn, that delayed auto triggers, and then it comes back for Zenos and goes, all right, you've had enough fun. Let's get out of here, and removes him from the game. Okay, that's the basic use case for this ability. Now their question is, we played Zenos from the break zone. He tried to have his fun, and he died to Odin, right? So he got sent back to the break zone. So they're saying, does he still get removed from the game? It says, I'm not sure if he gets lost from what looks to be a delayed auto. It is a delayed auto. We just went over that. This is a fun question, because it is kind of like, wait, what's the continuity between a card moving zones, and does the effect know where the card went, and all that good stuff? An important thing to keep in mind is another kind of broad rule, is that whenever a card changes zones, it's considered a new iteration of that card, right? So you can have the same physical card. Let's say your deck only had one with Zenos in it. We don't have multiple here or anything, right? We only have one copy. If that card leaves a zone and then goes back to that zone, it's not the same copy as far as the game is concerned, right? So let's say we played this Zenos from the break zone and entered, and then we go, okay, welcome Zenos, you've been stamped, you are Zenos 616. All right, welcome Zenos 616, do your thing, right? And then Zenos does his thing, gets killed by Odin, and then goes to the break zone. And when he goes to the break zone, they go, Zenos, welcome to the break zone. Here we go. You are Zenos 838. Okay, not the same one. Not Zenos 616. He's also in a different zone, right? So now I should point out that the game understands the continuity of like where this card came from. It knows it came from the field, and that it was like what it was before, but it is considered a new copy, right? So then that auto ability resolves, and it says at the end of the turn, remove Zenos from the game. So they're wondering, wait, it's in the break zone. Is that auto ability going to chase after Zenos in the break zone and go, hey, you all right, to the RFG pile? And it's not going to, for a couple reasons. One is that when that auto ability resolves, it's looking for Zenos on the field. Right? It was like, okay, where's Zenos? When I left you, Zenos, you were on the field. You were right here. What happened? Where'd you go, Zenos? It doesn't look beyond that, right? It's just kind of stuck by the bounds of like, it wants it to be there. It's not there. And it just kind of shrugs and then goes about its business. The other reason is that it's not even the same Zenos, right? It pops up and it's like, I'm here for Zenos 616. I'm here for Zenos 616. Where are you at? And then Zenos 838 is over in the break zone being like, I don't know. I haven't seen 616. I have no clue. So for a couple of reasons, it doesn't happen. So I guess the fun thing is that if Zenos died to Odin, then he escapes that auto ability, and then next turn you can cast him again. Right? So that's fun. You get around him being removed, and you can just if you keep finding a way to get him to the break zone before the auto ability triggers, you can just keep on looping him every turn. Right? So good stuff. All right, that was our last question for today. So hope you enjoyed that. Hope you learned a little something. There's quite a variety of stuff that we covered there, all the way from tournament stuff to how choosing works and what happens when things go on the stack and everything. So good variety. If you have any questions or any feedback or anything, you can find me on Discord. My username is Judge Jared. On Facebook, my page is facebook.com/Judge Jared. YouTube, I'm right here. You're already here. So, you found me. And then on Twitter, I am at Judge Jared FFTCG. So you can find me in those places if you have any questions or feedback or any of that stuff. But yeah, I hope everybody is enjoying themselves in whatever games they're playing this week. Like and subscribe. I gotta do the YouTube thing. Yeah, like this video, subscribe to me, go like other videos. They don't even have to be mine. Go like other people's videos, I guess. But if you like mine, that's even better. But But yeah, like and subscribe and do that stuff. You can also like me on Facebook. You can follow me on Twitter, and you can just see who I am on Discord, I guess. Send me a message if you want. All right, I think I covered everything at that point. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Judge Jared, and until next time, court is adjourned.